So there's a concept floating around right now that is sparking a lot of controversy, especially among spiritual people. It's called the let them theory, which is the title of Mel Robbins' latest book, Let Them. And in case you didn't get to read her book yet, the main premise is that you want to let people be who they are. So if they want to leave your life, you let them leave. If they're not supporting you, you let them not support you. If they want to talk crap about you, you let them talk behind your back. You let them disappoint you, etc., etc. But as you can imagine, this idea of letting people basically do whatever they want to do has triggered a lot of people who believe that the let them theory is enabling a lot of bad behavior and it's oversimplifying complex interpersonal dynamics, especially if you don't have a regulated nervous system. Letting people do whatever they want can feel quite traumatizing. And in this episode, we're going to look at how best to navigate it and how to interpret it and how to use the let them theory to our advantage. Because on the surface, that pushback that the let them theory has gotten, I could see how it would be valid from that sort of ground level perspective, from the binary black or white perspective. Letting somebody do whatever they want to do can enable bad behavior. It can feel like you're being too passive. It does oversimplify trauma and abuse and power dynamics. And it's true. From the ground level perspective, not everyone deserves that level of access or autonomy in our lives. But that's why I always make the distinction between the ground level perspective, which is the more black or white, dualistic, linear thinking, and the spiritual perspective, which is the broader 30,000 foot view, which is the more both and type of thinking. The spiritual perspective is our ability to hold multiple truths in our awareness at the same time. So to see what's happening at the ground level, not denying that, but to hold that as well as to hold the broader truth at the same time. And here's what I want to offer. From the spiritual perspective, let them is not a cop out, it's a call inward. And Pema Chodron, who I love to quote and read her work, she sums up the spiritual perspective perfectly. She says, trying to control life and its outcomes and its timings and its messiness is what causes suffering. And letting go is what leads to peace. And so what that truly means is that as spiritual people, we're willing to at least consider that we have very little control over what other people do and how they show up, if they even show up. And that doesn't mean we can't care or we can't have a conversation or let people know what our boundaries are or let someone know that this is not okay for me. We can absolutely communicate and express whatever we need to express in order to feel nurtured and in order to stay emotionally available in relationships. But the idea that someone is going to hear our communication and then receive it in the perfect way that we would like for them to receive it and then adjust their behavior accordingly, that's an illusion. I mean, if it happens, that's great. But a lot of times, in fact, I would say probably most times, it does not happen. In which case, we can continue to communicate and get clear about our expectations. But after doing this so much that you feel like there's some sort of block in the communication, and maybe the block is coming from their end, or maybe it's coming from your end. But at the end of the day, you decide that this is too much of a one-sided situation. Then at that point, this is where the let them theory kicks in. So let them is not the first response. Let them may be the 10th response or the 20th response. It's basically an admission that, look, you don't have control. Surprise, surprise. And so you either accept that things are the way they are, or you decide to do what's best for you. And that could be creating distance. It could be making yourself less available. It could be choosing to love someone from afar. And it's not personal. It's honoring you and what you need. So at the end of the day, this is about recognizing the truth of life, that control is an illusion. And the only thing that I can do when I'm faced with the idea that I have no control is to adapt. And the way that I choose to adapt is solely up to me. Otherwise, when we continue to buy into the illusion of control, we remain hooked into this situation that we know deep down isn't right. And we keep arguing and we keep having to explain ourselves and we keep trying to fix things and performing because we think if I can just do this one more thing, or if I just repeat my point one more time, maybe they'll finally get it. And we've all been there. But the spiritual perspective reminds us that if a dynamic where we're constantly feeling the need to prove our point and apologize and manage somebody else's behavior is continuing to be the same way over and over and over, and we're continuing to feel stuck in it, then probably we bypassed the more important question. And so this is the question that a lot of people who are triggered by the let them theory, they don't want to ask, because this question requires them to take responsibility for their experience. If you're tired of trying to change, but you fall off the wagon and start over and repeat that process every few months, my latest book, The Year You Transform, can be your guide to adopting the most sustainable path to transformation. With 10 powerful 7-day challenges and a proven roadmap, this book will give you all the tools you need to transform one small win at a time. Get your copy at theyearyoutransform.com. And the question is, why did I open the door to this person? Or why am I continuing to open the door to this person in the first place? And that's where it gets uncomfortable, because it means that we have to own our invitation. In other words, this is the step before the let them theory even kicks in. Before we start to talk about letting them, we have to ask ourselves, why are we even having this conversation? Because apparently at some point we invited this person into our life, or we were attracted to this type of person, right? There are 8 billion people on the planet. And here we are sitting with this person for some reason. And there were choices that we made somewhere down the line where now we're here feeling the tension, feeling the lack of control, feeling frustrated by something that the other person is doing or is not doing. And in these situations, I like to think about the metaphor from the vampire movies, right? I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Sinners with Michael B. Jordan, but in the movie, the regular people are being confronted by these singing vampires. And when the vampires approach the normal people, they're very friendly, they're very complimentary. And this is what causes the normal people to invite the vampires into their gathering, where, of course, they wreak havoc. And the vampires know what they're doing because they can't enter into someone else's space without first receiving an invitation. And so eventually, once everybody figures this out, they obviously stop inviting the kind and complimentary vampires in, because they know that if they invite them in, then it's their responsibility for what happens next. Now, obviously, that's just a movie, but it's a larger spiritual metaphor, right? Toxic people don't just magically appear in our lives. At some point, we invited them in. And now I know some of you are probably thinking, well, what about my uncle, or what about my relative who's toxic? I didn't invite them in. I was born into this family. But here's the thing. After you turn 18 years old, you are an adult. And that means you have choices. You don't have to be around anyone who you don't want to be around. Every single person in your life after you turn 18 is there because on some level, you have invited them into your space. And this is the uncomfortable truth of life. You handed them the key. So when Mel Robbins says, let them, from the spiritual perspective, we don't want to hear roll over and take whatever behavior they're dishing. Instead, we want to hear step out of the illusion that we don't have a choice, because we actually do have a choice. We can adapt to the situation. And that's what the spiritual path ultimately demands, is adapting to the change, right? Adaptability isn't passive. It's actually quite powerful, because adaptation says I can honor what is without abandoning what I am. I can acknowledge your behavior and still choose peace. I can feel hurt, but I don't have to build my identity around it. Now, I'm not saying this is easy. Lord knows it's not easy. Letting go is never easy, but it is quite freeing. At least it's more freeing than holding on to the illusion that's going to continue to bring pain and suffering into your life. Now, let's say you hear all of this and you think, I don't know about that. I don't know if I agree. That's fine. But consider this. What's the alternative to letting them? Okay. The alternative is staying anchored in the drama loop. The alternative is trying to predict and manage and fix people who've already shown you probably dozens, if not hundreds of times, who they are. And if you haven't done enough research in the control approach, what you're ultimately going to conclude is that it's incredibly exhausting and it increases your suffering, right? Because the only outcome of refusing to accept reality is self-induced suffering. So again, letting them isn't about letting them off the hook. It's about letting yourself off the hook from trying to play God in somebody else's life. And maybe the real challenge isn't just letting them, it's letting yourself walk away, letting you be misunderstood, letting you start over without the closure that you thought you deserved or needed, letting you stop performing for someone who doesn't even see you or appreciate you. From a spiritual lens, that kind of letting go is not weakness. It's love. It's the highest form of love. And look, if they're meant to stay in your life, they're going to figure out a better way to relate to you. Maybe an apology is in order. Maybe a recognition of their behavior is in order. Let them step up into a higher level of awareness and earn a spot in your life instead of you continuing to drop down into their ground level awareness in order to essentially beg them to behave better. And it's real easy to know if you're caught up in this dynamic, right? On some level, you're suffering. You're wondering, why is someone behaving badly? Or why are they not supporting me? Or why are they not choosing to show up in a different way? But a more powerful question to ask is, why am I still here trying to control them? And what would it look like to let go of that control? Now, look, you're not going to be perfect at this at first. You're probably going to overreact. You're probably going to overshoot the mark. But at least you're being more intentional about taking responsibility for the quality of that dynamic. And then from that more intentional place, you're going to be able to create a more sustainable dynamic. If not with that person, then with everyone who comes into your life in the future. Not from holding on, but from letting them be themselves in the same way that you want others to let you be yourself. What do you think? Does this fit with your experience? If so, let me know down in the comments, and please share this spiritual perspective with someone who you feel needs to hear this message. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you resonated with this spiritual perspective and you want more, start by checking out this one. And otherwise, we've got an entire playlist of similar spiritual perspective videos. So make sure you're subscribed and please leave a comment letting me know which other topics you'd like for me to cover on this channel.